Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're doing something a little different. We are completely reframing how we look at the things and, honestly, the people that just do not fit the mold. We spend so much of our time obsessing over patterns, right? We're always looking for the average, finding comfort in the predictable. But what happens when something totally breaks that pattern? Okay, let's dive into this.
So take a look at what we've got up here. It's a classic scatter plot. You've probably seen a million of these in stats classes or business meetings or scientific reports. Notice that big, dense cluster of data points right smack in the middle? They're all gathered tightly together, following a super clear, predictable trend. But then, look at those little red dots way off to the side, the ones hanging out completely on their own. In the data world, we officially call these outliers. They're just sitting there, totally isolated from the main group, literally playing by their own numerical rules.
And seeing that really makes you wonder, right? What do we actually do with the pieces that just don't fit? I mean, when we step away from a sterile spreadsheet and look at human society, how do we usually treat these anomalies? How do we handle the people, the ideas, or the movements that absolutely refuse to follow that predictable path of the majority? Let's ground this for a second with a quick technical definition. Basically, a statistical outlier is a data point that differs significantly from other observations. Simple enough. But what actually happens to them in the real world of data crunching? Well, they're usually ignored, or adjusted, or just tossed out completely, all because they ruin our nice, perfect trends. We literally hit delete on the things that don't conform just so our charts look a little neater. Moving right into Section 1, introducing the poet's lens. To shift our perspective away from that cold, rigid world of statistics, we're going to explore this truly beautiful, thought-provoking piece by the author and poet Oluyomi Oladevid. She has crafted a poem called Musings, the Outlying Dots. And throughout her work, she takes this highly mathematical, kind of sterile concept of the discarded outlier, and she breathes this incredible, defiant life into it. She actively challenges us to see the absolute beauty in standing apart. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how her background perfectly sets the stage for her writing. As a Nigerian who deeply loves people, she describes herself as a solutions generator, someone who is genuinely concerned with global transformation. Plus, she is heavily guided by her faith and her Father God, who she actually calls the wheel within her wheels. And it is exactly this profound passion for humanity and her deeply rooted worldview that drives her to look at those discarded, lonely dots on a graph and see something completely magnificent.
Which brings us to Section 2, the pressure to conform.
Her poem starts off by confronting a reality that, let's be honest, we all know way too well. That immense societal pressure to just squeeze yourself right into that central cluster. She opens with these compelling lines. They may never break on your headlines. They may not make up your popular statistic. Right out of the gate, she's setting up this expectation that outliers, they aren't the ones making the front page. They aren't blending seamlessly into the popular consensus.
And this brilliantly illustrates her technique throughout the whole piece. While society might just write them off as a blip on a popular statistic, she instantly counters that with a hard truth. Still, they are accounts. Boom! With that one line, she establishes the undeniable existence and the immense value of the outlier. They exist, they matter, and their stories are entirely valid, whether the mainstream metrics want to acknowledge them or not.
She continues to peel back the layers of how society tends to shut these individuals out. She writes, "They may never sit on your greedy boards. They may not speak up in a remote porch." What she's pointing out here is that outliers are so often excluded from traditional positions of power or corporate influence. They aren't the ones sitting in the boardroom making those predictable and frankly often greedy decisions that govern the masses.
But look at how she flips the script right back around. She says they may not meet up with your mediocre scales. The specific choice of the word mediocre here is just so powerful. Society usually assumes the outlier is the one falling short, right? But she argues that the conventional scale itself is what's actually mediocre. The outlier isn't just trying to meet the average bar, still they are standards. They are literally setting a completely new, elevated standard for the rest of us. The defiance in her words really starts to build here. She notes they may never qualify on luscious streams. They may not dress up to follow your blind party. I want you to think about that phrase for a second. A blind party. That is a scathing critique of the mainstream masses just blindly following one another without ever questioning where they're going. The outliers purposefully, and I'd say rightfully, choose not to dress up for a party that absolutely refuses to see clearly.
Let's transition over to Section 3, the hidden value within.
This is where she really uncovers the hidden value of these outlying dots by giving them these incredibly powerful metaphorical identities.
Even if they don't fly in your specific field, or, as she writes, glean sufficient handfuls for home, she emphatically declares, still, they are roots. They are the deep, often entirely unseen foundational strength that holds everything else up. And hey, without roots, absolutely nothing can grow.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because she writes that they may not straighten up with your expected lines, but still, they are lesson curves. I just absolutely love this imagery. Outliers aren't straight, rigid, predictable lines. No, they are the curves, the sudden deviations, the unexpected turns that force us to challenge our long-held assumptions and ultimately teach us something entirely new.
And the metaphors just continue to flow so beautifully here. She explains that they may never sing with your street bands or dance to your standardized club steps, but still, they are sweet melody. They possess their very own unique internal rhythm. They don't need to match the loud, chaotic, synchronized noise of the crowd to create something genuinely beautiful and resonant.
Her focus then shifts to their profound sense of personal integrity. She writes, they may never acclaim wealth without rights. They may not possess speed without accurate depth. This really highlights that true outliers value depth, accuracy, and doing things the right way over the superficial pursuit of quick speed and empty wealth. They just refuse to cut corners just so they can join the cluster.
So the crucial point is how this all builds to this incredible realization. Still, they are diamonds. Think about how a diamond actually forms out in nature. It requires immense pressure, huge amounts of time, and it happens buried incredibly deep beneath the surface, completely isolated from everything else. It's exactly that isolation and that intense pressure that creates something so rare, so tough, and so universally valuable.
And yet, despite being literally as valuable as diamonds, they carry this quiet, dignified strength. She writes, they may never shout for due attention, they may not lie low without a roar. This is such a beautiful, striking paradox. You see, they aren't out there begging for the spotlight, they aren't shouting for society to look at them, but their presence is still so undeniably powerful that they just can't simply lie low. They possess this quiet, unshakable roar. Which leads us to this profound, yet incredibly simple realization. Still, they are free. True freedom? It doesn't come from blending in with the masses. It comes from stepping completely outside of that statistical cluster, dropping that heavy, exhausting burden of needing to conform, and just existing genuinely as exactly who you are meant to be.
Okay, moving into our final section here, embracing the outlying dots.
As we reach her ultimate message about these nonconformists, she delivers this final, powerful critique of the masses, noting, they may never fulfill exact routes of a multitude. They may not be discernible to blind guides. You just cannot use a conventional, everyday roadmap to track where an outlier is going, and you certainly can't rely on blind guides to understand a path that is so exceptionally unique.
She concludes her whole string of poetic metaphors with this striking, incredibly beautiful image. Still, they are starlights. Now, in a basic scatterplot, an outlier is just this distant dot on a page, something you can easily erase. But in her eyes, looking through the poet's lens, those distant dots, they are brilliant starlights in the dark, standing out against the vast emptiness to actually guide the way for the rest of us.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and it leaves us with one incredibly important, slightly provocative question to ask ourselves. Are you an outlying dot? Have you been letting the constant pressure of that main cluster make you feel like you're just some mistake that needs to be deleted, instead of realizing that you might actually be a standard, a diamond, or a starlight? I really encourage you to recognize your own inherent worth entirely outside the norm. Thank you so much for joining me in exploring this beautifully reframed concept today. Keep questioning the norm, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.